All right, we're going to continue on with our Battleship API. And we got as far as showing you this massive async task that we had yesterday with all of these methods that had to be overridden in order to make a simple request to the outside web. Very painful. You'd think, and I said this yesterday, you'd think that the Google Android API would be more advanced by this point, but it's just so painful. So the problem is that we have to write this as a separate thread. So remember that our do-in background is going to be running on a separate thread than our UI thread. So we have to set that up. And I created this server request object. This is just my own object that I pass some information in. And we're going to do this login activity. And in order to log in, my API in Rails, the Battleship server, is using basic authentication. So basic authentication uses, let's see if I can find a good example online. It uses this. Here's a good example. This is what gets passed in your request to the server. So the Android has to create this string called authorization : basic, and then this is a Base64 encoded string of your password and your username combined together. Okay? And the server on the other end, my Rails server, takes this string, decodes it, gets the username and password out of it, uses that to log into the server and authenticates you. Okay? So this is all done in what we call the header. This is not as part of a post. We're not posting this in a form. It's part of the header that we have to pass. All right, so we have to create that on our side. So I have in my view, I have a username and password edit text. So I want to get that and I want to create that a string with those two things combined. So I'm going to call it credentials. And we're going to say my username text edit box. I want to get the text from it and convert it to a string. And I want to add to that a colon because we have to get the username : password. Those two are combined into one string. We're concatenating them into one string. Oops, that should be a plus sign there. And then we get the password. So password.getText.toString. All right, so that creates a concatenated string with whatever they typed in the username box, with a colon, with whatever they passed in the password box. Then I have to call some built-in Java functions. So I'm going to create a new variable that I'm going to call Base64 encoded credentials. And it's going to be, I'm going to declare it above as just a string. So we'll copy this. And it's going to be a string which has nothing in it to start with. All right, and we're going to use some built-in Java method called Base64. Base64 built in, and we're going to call the encode to string method, and we're going to get our credentials string, and it has to be in a byte array because that's what this method requires. So we're going to call this method called getBytes, and then we're going to pass in a flag called Base64 dot no wrap. All right, so this basically creates the string that looks like this. Okay, so if I were to run this and pause it, I'd get a string that looked something like that. All right, so let's actually do that. Let's return nothing so I can get it to compile. Let's see if I can actually run it and debug it. All right, so we're paused, we're running. Let's see if it actually runs my little program here. Doesn't look like it's going to. Oh, because I'm not unlocked. There we go. All right, so I've got my username and password, so I can type in something like Dave at lockersoft.com.
Show you a password.
Yeah, and I'll put, whatever. And I hit login, and I come to this point. My Base64 string looks like exactly like that string that I showed you. And notice it has these two equal signs at the end. That comes from the no wrap. This is an old way of logging in, and if you were to do this from a web page, it brings up that little dialog that says username and password, right? That's what they call basic authentication. Now, this is not secure. It's as secure as a form that says ask for your username and password, because it's being sent in the clear, just like a form submission would be. So it's no worse or better than that. Ideally, if you really cared about this, you would put it behind an SSL certificate. Everything would be encrypted. That's your best way of getting that. All right, so my Base64 credentials are okay, and now it'll continue on. Nothing is going to happen because it runs my async and it doesn't do anything. So. All right, so let's go into our, let's finish off the calling of this async task. Why is it, let me pause this. So this server request is just a object that I'm passing to my async task, and I fill it with information. And then I have to actually create a JSON async object from my private class here. So I'm going to call it task, something nice and useful. And so we create a new getJSON async. And then to execute that task, we call the execute method on that task that we just created. Then we have to pass in, remember that these three variables here, these are virtual variable types. Remember, what did this server request ... mean from yesterday?
With the other thread. Something with the other thread.
The ... means it's an array of these types of things. So it's it's an array of server request objects. So we have to pass it an array of server request objects. So I have to create this array, server request array, that has my one object in it that I created, which is kind of weird, I know. So I'm going to pass in this SR that I created here. So what that does is it puts an SR in an array of server request objects, and that server request array gets passed into my do in background method.
So with that array,
I could pass multiples of those, right? That's the idea. And I tried to make this not have an array as the parameter, but it wouldn't work. It has to have an array of these things. I haven't, but I could think of, you could pass a series of URLs and have it go get all of the data before it returns. That might be one way to do it. That make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Orbit's and Kayak or wherever those places get all those information from hotels and flights.
Yeah, right. So this is, now we're going to fill in our do in background method to do some stuff. Excuse me. So the what we get here is whatever params is, the first element in that array is the first SR object that I got passed in, right? So all I'm doing is I'm getting it back out of the array of server request objects. So I have now my single SR. Okay, everybody follow me there? Kind of weird that I had to put it into an array and get it back out of an array.
That's in a subtraction sign.
This one?
Subtraction next to it, minus params, dash.
This one here?
No. Between SR and params. That would
Equal sign.
It's just zoomed out a lot.
Yeah, it looked weird on our side.
Did it really?
Yeah. For a minute, it looked like we couldn't see the space between it. It looked like a minus.
Oh, really?
Until you moved.
Until I zoomed it out, I see. Okay. There you go.
Thanks.
For you old people that are blind.
Yeah.
All right. So remember my server object, my server request had in it the URL that I was trying to get to, and I had a getter for that. So I can get the URL from that object. So I need to get this URL. So I'm going to have a string, which I'm going to call my login URL. And that comes from my getURL method. That's my getter to get the string out of that. So my login URL is basically going to be this this string right here. All right, which I have to change. This should be login.json. We're going to log in first. And sorry, it should be user / All right. So I get my URL. I then have to set up a connection to this server using some Android good stuff. And since it has a high probability of failure, I have to put this in a try block. And I have to create a URL object, which is built into Java, from my login URL. And import that. There we go. I have to import that value in here. And I have to have my catch, obviously, down here. And I have to catch an IO exception, which I'm going to call IOE. And we're just going to print the stack trace. We don't care. All right, and my URL has got to be defined up here. I need a URL object called URL, which initially has nothing in it. Now, I also need to have, this is just really complicated, I have to create an HTTP, holy cow, HTTP URL connection, which I'm going to call URL connection. And that will also start with a null. and I create that URL connection is going to be a HTTP URL connection object from my URL that I just created, calling the open connection. All right, so that makes a connection through the web from my Android device to the URL that I have. All right, then I have to pass my credentials along with this. So I have to set some properties on my URL connection to add this authentication property. And remember, it started with authorization. Remember the URL, what I'm doing is I'm building up this string. The authorization is the header element, and then I'm going to pass in this data here. So authorization is the name of it, and then I'm going to pass this string called basic space plus my Base64 encoded credentials that I created. All right? So that will pass along with my request. Then I have to actually make the connection. I have to say, actually go out and try to connect. Once I made this property, now this authorization, Base64 credentials, my username and password is going to get sent in my request to that URL of the login JSON login. All right, are you with me so far?
Yes.
All right. So what that does, that gets us the connection. That's all it does so far. Now, once I have the connection, I have to do another whole try block. Excuse me. That if my connection worked, if it's not equal to null, that means I got some connection out to the web. Then I'm going to create an input stream. I have to create a buffered input stream from the URL connection that I just made and using its input stream. So what that does is it lets me read the data that's coming back from that request to the website. All right? And that in variable I have to create is an input stream up here. So I need an input stream here. Input stream, which I'll call in. Nothing's easy in Java. Once I get that, if that's okay, I'm going to create a buffered reader. So that I can read this data. And I'm going to have to create a new input stream. This is just so painful. From my input stream, oh my God, of type UTF-8 because that's what my server is sending back. Now, oh, it's unhandled exception, so that's okay. We're going to handle some exceptions.
Got an extra parenthesis there too. Oh, maybe not. A buffer reader, like InputStream.
Oh, the buffered reader. This is this 8 is for this buffered reader here. So this goes with that one, and that goes with this one.
Oh, maybe that's.
So then I'm going to create a string builder, which I'm not sure I really need this, but it's supposedly faster. And I need something to read, because in a request to the web, if it's very large, I have to read it in pieces. I have to read a line at a time and create this long string of all the data, because I can't never guarantee from the web if I'm going to get an entire web page in one block. So I might have to read multiple times. So that's why I have to set up this input stream and read a line at a time until, and then this is my while loop. I'm going to read while my line is from my reader. I'm going to read a line at a time. Well, that's not equal to null, because when I get a null, that means I've read to the end of the block. And each thing that I read, I'm going to append to my line. So the ending result of this, and I'm going to append a /n, just so that I have a nice string to parse. This loop will read every bit of data from the connection to the web server until I run out of information. All right, are you with me so far? Mostly, I know it's painful. Then once I'm done, I need to close my my reader, and at this point, I'm just going to save my data as a JSON data string, and I'm going to call the toString method on this string buffer. All right, so I need a string up here called JSON data. And then finally, we need to catch all these exceptions. We'll just catch everything and print it out. And we have a finally block that if everything happened, we need to disconnect from our connection so that everything closes down properly and the connections are all closed correctly. Painful, eh? That's not even half of it. But at this point, I'm going to break and see if I actually get data in my JSON string. Okay? I'm going to actually run this now. I've got some problem here. My in has to be initialized to something. All right, so let's debug this. I'm going to break on this point here and see if I actually got data back from the server. All right, so I'm going to pause while I have to put in actual credentials now to work this. All right, so now when I hit the login button, it's going to go to my login to server. I'm going to encode my credentials from my two text boxes, launch my async task, which launches a new thread, does this do in background, goes through all this garbage to make a connection to the website, and reads all the data from that connection back into the string. So hopefully that will happen at that point. All right, so we got that far. Let's continue on. And it crashed. Look at that. Isn't that useful? So let's go see if we can find why. No, it's, I was going to try to show you. The reason is I never requested to get internet access in my manifest. So I have to do that. I can't see the error, but let's look at our manifest. I have to request access or my internet connection will never work. Yeah, so it depends. That's what shows up when you download from the Play Store. It says this app requires all of these things, and it gets that all from the manifest file, right? So I need to have a user's permission of the android.permission.internet. Nah. All right, so let's run it again. And hopefully this one will work. All right, we'll try again. We log in. We got to my first break. And it's not getting to my next break. I probably should have started up here. It didn't crash, but it's not actually making a connection. So I'm getting an error in this socket connection here. It got as far as this line. And I got a permission denied.
Was that the old one?
So this, no. So the, it actually went out and tried to make that connection, but it's likely either my site is down or my password was wrong. So let's go see Battle Game Server. Log in. All right, so it's wrong information. It's I think it's my SCC account. All right. So I think that worked. That actually worked. So let me pause and put in my. All right, so let's try again. I put a new breakpoint up here too, so we'll see if that breaks earlier. Log in. So I got my first breakpoint. Got to my URL, so I can step through this. So it actually got a connection. I'm getting data back. I'm reading from it. I'm reading all the data. And at this point, my JSON data should have, once I execute this line, should have data in it. So look at my data. Isn't that beautiful? Data. This is a JSON object of all my information from logging in. So I get my ID, my first name, last name, avatar name, all that cool stuff, right? Sweet stuff. It actually worked. Sweet. All right, and it hits my finally block, it disconnects. So now what I have to do, and we'll do this tomorrow, is take this data and do something with it. I have to save that in some structure that I have on my side. No, not a database. All right, so that's enough for today. That was painful enough.